Well, hey everyone, it is Mike, and thanks so much for joining us here on the main track. It's great to have you on board. Hope you're having a great summer. It is certainly flying by, and it's been a very hot one here in Missouri. Also a very busy one, and I am excited to announce that the project that has been keeping me so busy for the last few months is finally here and in my hands and rolling out. This here is Show-Me Katy, our reprint of our book in an expanded edition. We have been getting this out to everybody here in the last few weeks, and we're so excited to finally have this done and get that out to you. Now, we've been working on this reprint of Show-Me Katy, which is the book featuring the prototype railroad that I'm modeling here on the layout, which is the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad's route to St. Louis across Missouri, also nicknamed the Show-Me State, hence the name Show-Me Katy. Now, the truck rolled up last week with a ton of books for me, and when I say a ton, I mean that quite literally. I think the 2 pallets weighed in about 2,500 pounds, so that is a lot of Show-Me Katy books here. Now, as I mentioned in previous episodes, we worked with a brand new publishing company this time, and when I opened the first box up to take a look, I was really impressed with how these turned out, and they're certainly an upgrade from the previous edition that we released back in 2017. Now, my office and layout room now smells like a Barnes & Noble bookstore with all of these books, but that's certainly not a bad thing at all. Now, we've had a lot of requests for the book ever since we sold out, I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, so I appreciate everyone's patience as we got this thing rolling again. Again, we have all those details for you about what is in the works now at themaintrack.com. Now comes the fun part, and that is going to be attending train shows and events all across the country where we'll have Show-Me Katy available. Now, the first big event we have coming up is the St. Louis Railroad Prototype Modelers Meet. That's going to be on July 25th and 26th, 2025 in Collinsville, Illinois, which is just across the Mississippi River from St. Louis. I've attended that show for the last several years. It's a great one. We are certainly looking forward to it. Glad to be able to have the book there this year. And if you're able to attend that show, come by and say hi. I'd love to meet you guys in person. Now, most of my train time in the last few months has been taken up with the book project. It's been a lot of fun and kept me very busy, but I've not had quite as much time to work on my layout. But in between all of the editing work on the pages and the working with the publishing company, I have been able to squeeze in a little bit of time here on the layout. Now, I've not got a lot of scenery progress done since our last video, but what I have been focusing on is my rolling stock collection and trying to make my freight trains a little more prototypical. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you know that I just love covered grain hoppers, also feed mills and grain elevators, and there's going to be several of those here on my layout. Now, today I'm running this short local train of hoppers led by GP40 number 238. Now, this is that former Penn Central and Conrail unit we decaled and patched up for the Katy a few episodes back. Now, I've always had a habit of buying a little bit of everything when it comes to covered hoppers, and pretty much what color scheme or road name jumps out at me or the logos that I thought were cool. Now, there's nothing wrong with collecting per se, and I have an appreciation for all things railroad, for all lines across the U.S. But I've been placing a renewed focus on my trains to make them more realistic. I've been doing this by paying closer attention to what I see in videos and pictures when it comes to cars on freight trains of my railroad in the specific time period that I model, which is July of 1987. And one thing that you'll notice that stands out is that trains are not usually made up of covered hoppers from a collection of railroads all over the country. Now, while it's a given that most of the hoppers on a train are from that particular railroad company, the remainder of the cars are generally from other roads in the same region of the country, especially nearby connecting roads. So what that means is generally on a Katy train, you'd mostly see Katy-covered hoppers, followed by some from Missouri Pacific or Union Pacific. Maybe you'd see several from Burlington Northern or Sioux Line, Chicago and Northwestern, and a few KCS and Santa Fe sprinkled in. But you would not see a whole lot of covered hoppers from the eastern roads like Chessie or Conrail or Seaboard System or even Illinois Central. Those would make it in occasionally, but those would be the exceptions. And likewise, you would not have seen a Conrail train in somewhere like upstate New York with a whole lot of Katy, Mopac, or Santa Fe hoppers. They were in there, of course, but they were not super common. And that gets whittled down even more when it comes to the hopper cars that were spotted on local spurs for grain loading or unloading, and generally these were mostly from the home road in particular, but you'd also see cars from private owners or car leasing companies in a pool arrangement, and sometimes you'd find some from connecting roads close by. Well, as the old adage goes, never say never, and that certainly applies to railroads and the freight cars you'd see on trains. But generally you would not find something like a Florida East Coast or a Grand Trunk Western covered hopper sitting on a siding along the MKT at a place like the Ladue, Missouri grain elevator. Well, the thing is, more and more freight trains back around 1987 had a whole lot of plain Jane cars lettered for leasing agencies and private companies. All the hoppers were not all the brightly colored ones with the big billboard lettering and rail company logos that you would have seen back in the 70s and early 80s. Well, there were a whole lot of basic gray cars, so my collection is changing a little bit, trying to keep it real. Now, boxcars and gondolas, on the other hand, were more free game since they carry all kinds of merchandise, and it was more plausible to find random cars from all over the country on any given freight train when it came to boxcars. And so I've been focusing on making my car roster more prototypical and trying to resist buying cars that wouldn't generally be on my trains, or at least keeping those to a bare minimum. And so I've been swapping out a lot of those oddball cars and trying to focus on the common and less on the uncommon. Now, speaking of grain, another little project I've been working on is upgrading my grain bins here at the Ladue grain elevator. Now, these started out as models from Rix Products, and I'll talk more about those here in a second. Well, I have used Walthers grain bins quite a bit in the past, and it's a pretty common kit out there. Well, thing is, I've not been a huge fan of how they've turned out, at least for me, right out of the box. Now, if you put these together before, you know they're on the tedious side to build and get just right. You have to cut out and glue the sections together individually to make these rings, and then you stack the rings to make your bins. And with that, you can create pretty much whatever height you need. Well, every time I've tried building one of these, they turn out uneven, almost like the weave of an Easter basket with bulges here and there. I have tried several things to get them right, including inside bracing to different methods of gluing them. Unfortunately, that resulted in adhesive seeping through the joints, making a mess, and I just could not figure out how to get them to look right. And that brings us back to these Rix Products bins. Now, these represent smaller bins like you'd see next to a small town grain elevator or maybe out on a farm somewhere. Now, I needed 2 of these for my Ladue elevator, and it was while I was working on these that I had a revelation on how to make the Walthers bins better. Now, the Rix bins are pretty decent, but one of the main drawbacks is that there are no foundations provided in the kit, and that leaves a gnarly little gap on the bottom of these. I'll get to a fix for that, though, in just a moment. Now, when I got the Rix bins done, I was pleasantly surprised at how smooth and level the bands turned out, and there's no bulging to speak of. And I thought to myself, why can't I make the Walthers bins look this good? Well, here's what I figured out. Take a look at the Rix bins from the inside. Well, inside they have tabs on the top that you use to stack the rings. But the Walthers have those tabs on the top and the bottom. Well, I could see where Walthers was going for with a goal for the top and bottom tabs, providing strength to try to line those up. But they don't always quite work out that way. And here's what I noticed with the Walthers bins. When you stack 2 rows, the tabs from the top of one are sort of fighting the pressure from the tabs on the top of the one below it, leading to that basket weave look. So what I did is I took the Walthers ring and snapped off those bottom tabs, and voila, things fit together a whole lot better. Well, if you don't want to deal with the cutting and the gluing and the stacking, there are these 3D printed bins from Southern Tier Grain Supply. I've not used these in particular, but I have seen them at several train shows in person, and they've looked pretty great from what I could tell. Now, what I have used from Southern Tier is that company's grain bin tops. I bought those smaller ones for my Rix bins, and the new ones are a lot more detailed with the vents and the ladder, and it also comes with that concrete foundation and a more detailed door. You can compare that Southern Tier roof with the one here from Rix. Now, these come already cut out for you. They come in a darker color just from the material they use in the manufacturing process and the 3D printing. So you'll want to spray those white or a gray primer first. And that way, when you paint the silver color to match the body of the bins, that darker color doesn't show through and it all matches together as one shade. For the paint, I use Tamiya Silver Leaf for the bins and Tamiya Royal Light Gray for the concrete foundation, and that's the same color I use for other projects that I need a good concrete color for. These weather up pretty nicely and can get you pretty much whatever shade of concrete that you're going for. As I mentioned, we are going to be at the St. Louis Prototype Railroad Modelers Meet on July 25th and 26th, 2025. We are super excited about that here in a few weeks. So again, if you're able to make the trip to St. Louis, come by, say hi. We will talk about the Katy, about the book, about my layout, whatever you want to chat about. I love any opportunity I get to talk about trains, obviously, hence why I'm here today. And if you're not able to make it to St. Louis, we'll just see you next time right here on the main track. Have a great one, guys.